Hello, today I'm talking about how to assess your creative work. Now, this is a really important consideration because when you're starting out, the challenge you have is you don't know if the work's good enough to send. You don't know if you feel confident enough to send it. You don't have any arbitrary sort of architecture to base your decision on as to whether this is good enough to warrant being paid. This is an issue because for a lot of new copywriters, they don't send it, or they don't even actually get a client because they're too afraid of what will happen if they do send it and that feedback that might come back. So it actually has these tentacles, you know, this fear of what will the client think of my work. And it could be so strong that you actually self-sabotage, that you don't get the client that you could easily get. You don't charge for the work that you could easily charge for, or you keep doing it for free when you really should be charging. So there's a lot of sort of subconscious sabotaging that can happen when you don't have the confidence to present your work and believe that it's good enough. Now, here's the thing. You'll never know if your work is good enough. Even the best top agencies in the world present work, put it on a TV show. They don't know if it's going to work. Yeah, they've tested it, but that's no guarantee it's going to work. So we do live in this world where it's incredibly fragile of not knowing. And that's stressful, but that's the nature of the animal that we're working with. That's the nature of advertising. If we knew it was going to work, well, we'd do more of it and we wouldn't waste so much money on things that didn't work. I mean, David Ogilvy, the famous David Ogilvy, said, we know advertising works, we just don't know, you know, we know 50% of advertising works, we don't know which 50%, which is so true. And it's still true. Yes, we can test, we can do all that, but until we've tried it, we actually don't know. And in order to test it, you actually have to put it out there anyway. So I want to talk to you today about how to assess your creative work. And the sooner you can rely on your own instinct to think, you know what, I think this is good enough. And I use those words quite specifically. It's good enough. It will probably be better than what the client could do. You know, just the nature of you doing the courses maybe that, you know, you've worked with me on, or the investigation that you've done, your own research, your own passion, the time you've put into it, it will probably be better than what the client could have done themselves. So just on that level, send it, right? Number two is that you're probably better than you think. And you're probably thinking, but Bernadette, you don't know me. I know, but I've coached thousands of students and the work that I see is generally better than what they think it is. And often my role is to help them just build their confidence, to say, you know what, whoever I'm talking to, this is good enough to send, you must send it. Stop tinkering, send. So in terms of you assessing your work, there's two categories you can fall into, or you can put that assessment into. One is about the actual briefing questions that you should be asking. And the other one is the craft of copy, in terms of, well, once you've written it, what do you need to ask yourself to ensure that you've covered off the basics? So I've created a document that's in the resource section, and you should maybe print that off and keep it handy so that when you go to a briefing meeting, you can actually make sure that those briefing questions are covered. And when you've written the copy, you look over it and you think, okay, has this been done? Tick. Has this been done? Tick. And really methodically go through that, because I've done this specifically because the things that get left out are often the most basic things, and they can really undermine your ability and undermine your piece. But if you go through these questions after you've written your copy and before you've taken your brief, and then you send it, you can do so with a fair degree of confidence that it's hitting the right notes. It's done what it needs to do. Now, only the client can ultimately judge that, and ultimately only the customer can judge whether it's working or not. But at least it gives you that impetus and momentum and confidence to present and get it moving, you know, get it dealt with, get the client looking at it, because that rubber hits the road. It's got to happen. And it's always nerve-wracking. To this day, I still don't know how clients are going to accept the work that I've written. I've just written a book. I don't know how the world's going to review that. It's nerve-wracking. You know, you look for those first reviews on Booktopia or Amazon, it's like, will it land? I don't know. And yeah, you can send it around to family and friends and the publisher, and everyone goes, oh, that's good. But at the end of the day, only the public will be the judge. So in terms of the briefing questions in the document that I've given you, this is in addition to the briefing sheet. Okay, there's 21 points on the briefing sheet. That's not what I'm talking about here. Yes, by all means, you must have that, and you will use that to go out and take your brief with your client. But in addition, there's these other questions that I would get you to consider, because sometimes we forget the most basic things. And I'll give you an example. Take asking about the product. What are we actually selling here? What are we actually promoting? And I've seen, this is a true story, when I was working for a very famous entrepreneur who managed famous people, and we had a speaking bureau and also the management bureau. And there was a client, I can't even say his name because I'll probably get sued. And it was a famous radio host, okay, and in Sydney. And there's a racing car driver with exactly the same name. And I wasn't actually part of this situation, but I was at the same desk where it all was happening. So I was able to oversee it. I've never forgotten that clearly, because I'm telling now 30 years later. But they booked the radio host. No, sorry. The client wanted the racing car person, okay, famous racing car driver. But the brief was not taken correctly, and the radio host was booked, and the radio host got in a helicopter and flew to the event and was fronting up to the podium when they all realized, wrong guy. It went down to the wire before anyone realized it is the wrong person. So this can happen. And it can be small things, like, for example, just say you're working with Coke and you think you're promoting Diet Coke, the can, and the client thinks you're promoting Zero Coke, the can, right? Even that one small piece of data that gets missed out because there's an assumption made can absolutely waste so much time and effort and money, because the whole thing has to be done again, not to mention it's embarrassing, and also it shows a little lack of detail, etc. So these are not things you want to be conveying to the client. So things like, what are we actually creating here? You know, have we got clarity around the piece that we're making? Do we know the word count? Do we know the sizing? Do we know where this piece is going to be placed? So there's a whole raft of questions on that. And then you move into so you look at that before you go into your briefing. And while you're at the briefing, just make sure that those things are covered off. And then when you've written the copy, okay, before you send it to the client, go through this checklist. Things like, does it have a really catchy headline? And of course, this won't be relevant for everything that you do, but in general, does it have a problem embedded in the headline that you solve? Is there a benefit in the headline? Is an image needed? What is the call to action? Have we used you phrases? Why are you phrases, not we phrases? Is it written from the perspective of the reader? Have we looked at sentence length? You know, that's a really easy one to overlook, but it means that the sentences are all the same length, which means when it's read, it looks da-dum, 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 and it's really quite boring. It doesn't make people want to keep reading. Have you used some link phrases, you know, to keep things interesting, engaging, especially at the start of a sentence? Is there an offer? Have you tested the website, you know, that you've linked everything to, so that you ensure that when the client gets it and they click on that link, it's going to the right particular page? So all these things need to be considered. And if you can assess it before you send it, then you are more likely to feel confident, so that when the client does come back to you, maybe with some suggestions or some, you know, feedback, you at least have thought it through, and you've looked at all the obligations and combinations of what it could be, and you can come at them with from a position of confidence and belief that what you've written is the best that you could do at that time, and that's all you can ask for. And from there, you start taking on the changes from the client, which is another topic altogether. But at least you've sent it, it's out there, and you're halfway to being paid. All the best.